Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I am delighted to be here with you. My name is Taylor Gagne. I am here with Vexit, and I'm just so pleased to be introducing today's webinar subject. We've got a really trendy subject here today on buying a house using the bank of mom and dad, the latest trend in millennial homeownership. So whether you're a parent lending money to a child to afford their first or a home, or you're an individual who is looking to purchase their first home, this webinar is going to be packed with information that'll be really useful to you in your life. So we're going to get into things right away, but just before we get started, I wanted to provide just some brief housekeeping here so you know what to expect for today's event. So as you can see, your mics and cameras are off if you're in attendance, but we invite you to use the chat box. So on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you can see that. That's where you can use to submit a question, any comments. If you want to just pop in and say hello, you're welcome to do so. Today's presentation should run us about 40 minutes. We're going to leave another 15 minutes or so at the end for your questions. So we've got a full 60-minute event today. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and we'll get to them right at the end of the presentation. And if you need to hop off, or if you're experiencing any technical issues, we are recording the full event. It's sent to you within about 24 hours, so just stay tuned for that as well. Today, our presenter who is with us, who I will introduce in just a moment, Anna Marie Musson, she's going to be offering a prize today to 50 of you in attendance, or if you're watching after the fact, to receive $100 off of a modern marriage contract. So Anna Marie is going to provide the details of what you get with a modern marriage contract and what it's all about later on in the presentation. But if you already know this is something you're really interested in, you want to hear more, you want to hear how it relates to your specific scenario, I would invite you to go to her website. So that's loveandmoney.ca. I'm going to put it in the chat for you. You can actually book a free discovery call with Anna Marie, and there's a link right in there that you can go to, book that call, and just have a chat with her and see how this relates to what you're going through right now. So I'm going to post that in the chat, and I'll also email it out after the event if it's something that you want to try out. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, or if you need a little refresher, here at Vexit, you would have saw a reference to Vexit Life in our opening video. And I'd encourage you to check it out. Vexitlife.com is our website. You're going to find tons of resources, articles, webinars like today. We create all this content in conjunction with experts from our network, and we have one here with us today, of course. So whether it's saving for a home, financial insights, caring for a loved one, managing your relationships, planning for retirement, there's all sorts of information there. It's available 24/7. It's free to use. So it's vexit.com. You can sign up, join our email lists. We send out invitations to events like today. And then if you're interested in working with a professional, you can actually go to our website, vexit.com, and use that to get matched and find a professional who can help with your specific circumstance. So we're going to get into things now. I am delighted to introduce Anna Marie Musson. Anna Marie is joining us here from Toronto, Ontario. I'm going to just make sure we've got access to unlock our presenters' microphones and cameras, so we should be good now. But Anna Marie is the founder and managing lawyer at Musson Law. It's a boutique law firm in Toronto, Ontario. Hi, Anna Marie. I can hear, or I can see you. I just want to make sure your audio is working okay. Awesome. Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to hand things off to Anna Marie to get started. She's actually brought a colleague along with her to support in some of the aspects of the presentation. So I'm going to pass it off. We're going to get into things, and I will be back on towards the end to help moderate our Q&A.
Thank you, Taylor. So I'm really excited to be doing this webinar today with my colleague, Eva Sachs. Eva Sachs is one of the co-founders of Love and Money, and she is a divorce financial specialist. She's been in this field for over 15 years and is helping clients when it comes to not only money matters in the premarital phase, but also in the event of divorce and separation. So Eva and I are going to be going through some of the aspects today of working with and using the Bank of Mom and Dad. And I'm excited to be working with her and excited to have her on this webinar. So thank you, Eva.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
So today's agenda, a few things that we're going to talk about. First of all, we want to talk a little bit about the real estate landscape, which is changing quite rapidly, as we're seeing. We're going to talk a little bit about what it's like to work with the Bank of Mom and Dad. And what I mean by that is, how do we characterize the payments? Is it a loan? Is it a mortgage? Is it a gift? We're going to talk about a modern marriage contract and cohabitation agreements. We're going to talk about how you have these difficult conversations with your kids, or how they have these conversations with their significant others, and some tips and tricks on how to make the conversations a little bit easier and a little bit more manageable. We're going to talk a bit about myths and misconceptions, because there's a lot of myths around marriage contracts and prenups, and we want to dispel some of those. And then we'll talk a little bit about our process, why it's unique and the way we work together, and then some time for Q&A. So let's just jump right in. So 33% of all new home buyers are asking for help from their parents to buy their first home. And this is really in part due to the increase in housing prices, specifically across the GTA, but in other areas of Canada as well. And what we're seeing in this trend is that the numbers are actually going up. So year upon year, housing prices are getting more and more, are getting higher and higher. And so first-time home buyers are finding it a challenge getting into the real estate market. And so a lot of people don't really understand that buying a home using the Bank of Mom and Dad, or getting money from your parents, actually carries a lot of risks. And so we're talking about when you're borrowing money or you're lending money to your kids, not only are we dealing with risks when it comes to the equity in the home, we're actually talking about risks on the down payment as well. And so we want to talk to you a little bit about what that looks like, and the very simple solution we have that will protect 100% of your investment. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So I think Eva's going to talk to us a little bit about the loan versus the mortgage versus the gift.
So thanks, Anna Marie. So when parents see that their children are struggling to buy a house and really want to help them out, which a lot of parents, they're lucky enough to be in the position to do that, they may be looking at this and saying, okay, we're just giving them money. But how you give it and how you define it is really, really important. So if it's a loan, and many parents in their minds, and kids may think it's a loan as well, you really need to paper it properly. It needs to have something that's signed that says what the amount of the loan is, that there's interest going to be charged, and in fact that these payments are going to be made. Now, in reality, that may or may not be happening. The other thing we see in a lot of cases is that sometimes these loans and the documents that are written up and that may be complete are really written after the fact. So when, in fact, the children have issues and the relationship is breaking down, and then they suddenly look at that and say, oh my goodness, we need this, we should have set it up as a loan. Let's just do that after the fact. So, and that certainly has its holes and doesn't work. If parents set it up as a mortgage, so the parent really takes on the role of the bank, and then they have some interest in the property, which the children, both their own child and certainly the spouse or the partner, may not feel that comfortable with. In fact, we know even if it's set up as a second mortgage, banks that are forwarding money or presenting money as a first mortgage don't feel comfortable when they see a second mortgage as being part of that. The other thing with that, again, with the repayments, it may affect both the debt to equity ratio for both the couple, and it certainly may affect the child's cash flow if they're, again, forced to make these payments. And the last way, which I think a lot of parents are thinking of, or is really thinking of it as a gift. Parents are just giving a lump sum of money with any expectations of repayment. They're doing it because they love their kids, they want to help them out. And they certainly don't think of the possibilities, of the strong possibilities of the relationship ever breaking down. And that's where the risks start to come into effect.
And so when we talk a bit about gifting money, and a lot of people think, well, that's got to be the easiest way to give money to my kids. The reality is this is probably one of the riskiest ways to do it. And when we look at it, the reason is because if your child is in a relationship and it's either a marriage or is getting married or in a cohabitation, if the couple breaks up, there's a very good chance that the equity is going to be shared equally, regardless of who put the down payment on. And so what I mean by that is one person could be making a minimal or no contribution towards the home, walks away with the same amount as the person or parents who made a significant down payment. And so we're seeing all sorts of situations where one person is seeing a windfall and the other person is losing equity, or in some cases, even some of the down payment. And so when we talk about this with clients and people who are interested in this issue, we always sort of turn our minds to the fact that the divorce rate in Canada is hovering in and around the 50% range. And so if you look at this and put on your investment hat, and if I were to say to you, well, we have this great investment for you, but there's a 50% chance you're going to lose equity or you're going to lose principal on it. Well, most people would never sign up for that investment or that deal. And it's really no different when it comes to these down payments, even though we're dealing with the issues of relationships. And so the solution we have is very simple. The modern marriage contract or the cohabitation agreement is really where the couple agrees that the down payment provided by the parents is returned if the couple breaks up. And so with these signed agreements, what's happening is we're able to protect 100% of the parents' money. And so from our perspective, it's really a no-brainer. So when we're coming across potential clients or people who are asking us about how do we lend money to our kids or gift money to our kids, what's the best way to do it? Well, we're really encouraging parents to make these agreements conditional upon advancing the money.
So in fact, what is a modern marriage contract? So most of us think of the word prenup. And the prenup certainly has a lot of negative connotations connected to it. So for a lot of people, when you think of a prenup, you think of a very wealthy family, a woman perhaps even in her wedding dress, sitting down at a table and everybody standing around saying, you better sign this or else, and the guests are waiting in the background and so on. And so we, although the concept is the same, we really refer to it more as a modern marriage contract between two people. And so the word contract clarifies and signifies a lot more of what we're trying to do with this. In the way we set these things up, we want it to be a fair agreement that really is, we're looking to protect 100% of the investments, whether it's the child's or the partner's or their parents' investment in the event of a breakup. And certainly most people don't think of themselves in that 50% category of breakups when they're planning their weddings, but the reality is that's happening. So in order to do this, rather than having lawyers pitted against lawyers, we all work collaboratively. Each side has their own lawyer. And then at the same time, we're all working together to clarify the goals of what the couple and or their parents are trying to achieve at the end of the day. The process is therefore simple, efficient, and very affordable too. So what happens in cases where people either aren't married and are living together? And that's certainly happening a lot that we see in the Toronto area, where a couple, their first connection in terms of the relationship is buying a property together. So the same agreement, the same process works for non-married couples who are going to be working together, who are going to be living together as much as married. It's still the same concept is there. It's still protecting their investment, and it can be updated if and when the couple eventually does get married. And so we also know that this isn't for new home purchases. It's also if you've bought a property, if you have a home and somebody moves in together with you, and looking at the implications of that and what you want to protect within your relationship if something goes wrong.
And so we thought it would be really helpful to walk through a real life scenario and the types of cases that we see where we have parents giving money to their kids to purchase homes, and what happens when you don't have the modern marriage contracts. And this is actually, this scenario that we created is based on a real life situation. And the reality is it's not only a one-off situation, this is actually a very common occurrence. And so we thought we'd walk you through a real life scenario so you can see what exactly happens. So in our story here, Jane and John have a son, their son Jack. Jack wants to enter the Toronto real estate market. He's a professional, has a really good paying job. He can afford the monthly payments with the mortgage, but needs a little bit of help with the down payment. So Jane and John decide that they're going to gift Jack $300,000 towards the down payment of his $1 million home. Jane and John want to support and help their son. They don't want to be paid back. They're actually quite happy that they, have worked hard through their life. They've saved up, and now they want to see Jack enjoy some of their wealth, and they want to help and support their son. So Jack too, however, has saved up. He saved up $100,000, and so he's also contributing towards the home. And the Mainstream Bank has a mortgage of $600,000. So everyone is happy, and Jack is loving his new home. Jack meets a girl. Jack meets Jill, they fall in love, and now they get married. Now, Jill also is a professional. They've decided, though, because the home's really Jack's, that Jill's not going to contribute a whole lot towards the month-to-month expense of the home. However, Jill's come into some money, and she's decided that she's going to pay down the mortgage and contribute $100,000 towards the home. So, unfortunately, after a short while, things start to get bumpy for Jack and Jill, and they decide that it's time to separate and divorce. Jill says now she wants to be bought out of the home. And with the hot housing market, the home is now worth $1.3 million. So how might these proceeds be divided? Well, if we look at the home sale price of $1.3 million, and we take off the mortgage, which is now $500,000 since Jill contributed her $100,000, we're left with $800,000 in equity. And that's now shared at $400,000 each. So Jack, who's contributed $100,000 of his own money, and his parents contributed $300,000, gets $400,000 of the home. So that's zero. Whereas Jill, who contributes $100,000, walks away with $400,000, and she gets a three-time return on her investment. And so what happens if the home is actually sold for $1.2 million? Well, in that scenario, when we look at the initial contribution by Jack and his parents at $300,000, they actually take a loss. And so Jill walks away with 2 times the investment, and Jack and his parents walk away with a loss. So what is the solution to all of that? Well, first of all, the modern marriage contract will help to resolve some of these issues that we have when we're dividing the equity. And I should back up just a little bit, because there are a few other scenarios that come up that people think about that they think doesn't necessarily apply to this current situation. So for example, what if Jack and Jill were just living together, weren't married? Well, the reality is it still doesn't matter. Jill still can have an interest in the home, and she still could potentially have access to the equity and an interest in the property. What if Jill wasn't on title at all? Again, title doesn't trump everything. And so once again, Jill very much can have an interest in that property. And the reality is, if Jill has any interest in the property, what she'll do is she will put a claim on title. She's going to tie things up in the court system trying to get payment. And Jack's going to spend a significant amount of money in legal fees trying to get a buyout on his home. And so when we're looking at all of those risks, we think, why take that risk when we have this solution, which is the modern marriage contract? So what happens in our scenario if Jack and Jill had the modern marriage contract? Well, let's look at the home sale price of 1.3 million. We're going to take off the mortgage, 500,000, and the equity is 800. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pay back Jack's parents the 300,000. And then the equity is going to be shared between Jack and Jill at 500,000, shared equally. So now Jack, first of all, his parents keep the 300,000. He gets back his 100,000, and his net gain is 150. And on the other side of the equation, Jill contributed 100,000. She gets her net gain of 150, and she keeps 250,000. And so, as you can see, this is obviously leading to a much fairer result for everyone involved in the process.
So then the question ends up being, well, how do we bring all of this up? Again, if we go to our typical scenario of the sign here in the wedding dress, that obviously doesn't work. So a big part of what we believe in is words matter and words make a difference. So using the word contract as opposed to prenup psychologically, I think, is a great starting point. Certainly, if it's a couple having this conversation, you want to bring it up in a way that doesn't threaten the other side, especially if if you're looking at things and saying it's somebody that already has a home, or they're getting into the relationship and maybe one spouse has more money to invest in a home anyways, as opposed to sharing equally. So you may need to be bringing this up sort of gently, subtly, certainly bringing it up early on in the conversation when you're first talking about buying a house together, for instance, or somebody moving in together. So you really want to focus on the what ifs, not so much of what if we break up necessarily at the beginning, but what if we have challenges in terms of one person or the other person perhaps not making some of the monthly payments. And so you work your way slowly into it. I think the other thing that really can end up helping is really looking at this and using the word relationship insurance. We're just, we don't get too emotional when we talk about house insurance or car insurance. So why would we add emotion to a conversation when we're talking about relationship insurance? It's no different, and looking at it from just a very practical, pragmatic way. And in some cases, as Anna Marie has cited, for when parents are making the contributions, the parents may be able to have the conversation with their son or daughter and say that the money that they're providing may be conditional on having a marriage contract. And again, that conversation can be presented in a way that's not threatening in any way, shape, or form. So is it ever too late to create a modern marriage contract? So almost never. So even if somebody's already married, or the wedding's happening in maybe 2 weeks and they start having these discussions, or they suddenly find themselves lucky enough to have purchased a home or have an offer accepted on a home, they can, rather than panicking at that point in time or putting a lot of unnecessary pressure on themselves, create the agreement and sign it anytime after they've purchased the home, after they've moved in, or certainly well after the wedding and the honeymoon.
So this is one of my favorite slides in the presentation, the idea of the myths and the misconceptions, because there are so many around the idea of prenups and marriage contracts that we thought it would be a really good idea to sort of tease some of these out. So the first one we talked about is, if I'm not married, I don't need modern marriage contracts. Well, what we call them instead is the cohabitation agreement, but the idea remains the same. And the reality is, even if you're not married, if you own a home and you are living in the home with your significant other, that person potentially has a right to claim an interest in your property. And many people don't realize this, and we sort of see it in our divorce and separation practice on the other side. So after breakup, people are shocked to learn that someone who's they're not married or they're not on title may still have an interest in the home. They still can tie up title, and they still can bring legal actions to seek a buyout. And so, you know, when we talk about this scenario, and especially if you already own a home and you're moving someone into the home, that really the easy solution is to put together the modern marriage contract or the modern cohabitation agreement. As I said earlier, title doesn't always trump. And so even if you're the only person on title, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to kick the other person out. And there are a lot of intricacies you need to know. And so again, this is where it comes into play, these contracts, because it really clearly from the outset indicates what should happen on breakup, especially when it comes to the money. Another one of our favorite ones that we always hear about is, well, these things are a total waste of money because they're always overturned by courts and judges. And being in the trenches and the legal system and the court system as we lawyers are, I can tell you that that is in fact not the case. The reason a lot of people think these contracts aren't worth much is because you only hear about the ones, and I'll say in the media or online, about the agreements that are overturned. But the reality of the situation is, if you have a properly drafted agreement and it has been negotiated in a proper format, the reality of the situation is these are upheld by courts and by judges. And judges certainly don't like the idea of people reaching agreements and then sort of changing their mind when things happen down the road on breakups. So they are actually very solid. And while nothing is 100% bulletproof, the reality is they are very strong, and the law really does want these contracts to be enforced. Another sort of myth and misconception that we get is, well, look, if my partner doesn't want an agreement, I think I'm just going to let it be. I don't want to upset the apple cart. It's not worth bringing this up. I don't want to even get involved in having this kind of disagreement with my partner. So I'm just going to not do it and just forget about it. And really sort of, we call that the bury your head method. And the problem we have here is this is a big red flag. And the reason being is we, again, sort of see it on the opposite side with our divorce and separation cases. The couples who are not on the same page financially actually have the highest breakup rates. So the people who aren't having these conversations early on and aren't getting on the same page financially, the reality is they need these agreements more than anyone else. And so the idea of let's just not even deal with this and let's just, you know, sort of move on and bury our heads, it's not a good option. That sort of dovetails us into the other one, which is the modern marriage contract is going to kill all romance. And, you know, as Eva sort of talked about this when having these difficult conversations, the reality is having an agreement like this in place really helps the couple start their relationship or their marriage off on the right foot. And I actually wrote a blog this week, and I've called it, I've been asked to sign a prenup and I'm offended. Here's why you shouldn't be. And I'll share the link in the chat. And the reason is I wrote this blog was because I really wanted to focus on what it would be like for someone to be asked to sign one of these agreements, and really to change the mindset from one of, wow, you know, my partner must be really greedy and selfish that he or she doesn't want to share with me. When the reality of the situation is these modern marriage contracts are really designed to help the couple ensure that the assets and debts are shared fairly if the couple breaks up, and to make sure that people know exactly what would happen and what to expect. And again, this is not a situation of when we break up, it's a situation of if we break up. So again, we're really focusing on this being more like an insurance policy and instead of an event that's going to happen. And so the idea with the modern marriage contract is that people are going to leave the relationship with some financial certainty and some financial security. So the idea of a winner versus loser is really not part of these agreements, and it's not part of the equation. And so imagine how much better the breakup plan looks like when it's created by a couple who is having this meaningful conversation while the relationship is in a good place, while they are in love, versus what it looks like upon breakup when emotions are reeling and people really aren't thinking clearly. And so I also encourage you to imagine the cost savings you will have not having to pay lawyers like myself to help you figure out what the breakup scenario looks like and how the money and assets are divided upon breakup. Instead, you can focus on healing from the emotional side of the breakup. And so the couple enters the relationship or the marriage actually feeling a great amount of security because they know that any conflict will be minimized in the event that there are challenges in the relationship. And the other point that I wanted to add to this is the law really does its best to try to divide family assets in as fair a way as possible. But I can tell you this doesn't happen all the time. And quite frankly, the number one complaint I get from divorce and separation clients is this is not fair. And while the law does the best it can to make the situation fair and to make division of assets, quote unquote, 50-50, I'm telling you the reality is it doesn't always look that way. And so this idea of doing nothing and letting the law be as the law will be is not a good strategy. The reality is you're probably going to be really disappointed with how the assets are divided if you leave it to the law. And so while the process, if you don't do a marriage contract and if you let the law apply as it is complicated, is expensive, and the most important thing is stressful. People we see fight over every small thing. It's horrible and quite frankly destroys people. And we have a solution here, an answer here, and a way to make it not be that, and a way to protect not only the assets, but also to some degree, the relationship and quite frankly, these people's stress levels. So how do you know if you need a marriage contract? And so we made a list of all of the types of situations we see where we would highly recommend a marriage contract or cohabitation agreement. It is for people who own a house, people who are borrowing money, any people who have savings. This is what a lot of people forget about. If you have pensions or stock options, you'd be surprised how many clients come in and we sort of ask them about their financial situation, and they always forget about the pension, but it's a big deal and it can be a significant amount of money. If you own a business, this is a big one too. We have a lot of entrepreneurs who are doing some really amazing and wonderful things. And it's a very good idea that we have the conversation on what to do if you own a business and how to protect the business. If you have inheritances, if you're expecting an inheritance, it's a good idea to talk to us about this. If you have a partner who has serious debt, and this is not only debt coming into the relationship or debt that's been accrued during the relationship. And there's various reasons for it, but it really can skew how assets are divided if one person has a significant amount of. If this is your second or third marriage or relationship, you may want to consider getting a modern marriage contract because you've already been through this once. You definitely don't want to go through the divorce and separation process again, not being prepared and not really clearly outlining the expectations and what should happen on breakup. And finally, if you have children from another relationship, it's a great idea to get a modern marriage contract because again, we want to make sure that the kids are protected. Oh, sorry, Eva.
Go back there. So how do you get started? Certainly our focus today is really on those couples that are looking at buying property or have property and are getting the money from mom and dad. So looking at those kinds of situations and the ones that Anna Marie described in our presentation, we're here to work with you on creating a modern marriage contract. It's all done via Zoom. We built in a process that's efficient and very careful. What do you get from a modern marriage contract? You get the work of 2 independent lawyers, 1 financial professional like myself. You have 1 collaborative Zoom meeting with the entire team where we really try and get a sense of what your goals are in creating this marriage contract and hearing from both sides, which is important to us all. You get 2 net worth statements. So when we're creating a modern marriage contract, we're looking at all your financial information, and it's helpful for us to have it. It's also helpful for your other spouse to have that too. This may be the one time that you're sharing that information. You'll have 2 meetings with your own independent lawyers to clearly understand if what the contract is saying is in fact representing the goals and the aspects that you want to have covered. And at the end of all of this, you get 1 lawyer drafted, secure, modern marriage contract. And we're doing all of this for a fixed fee of $32.50 plus HST. And in many cases, certainly the couple that's getting married and has a lot of issues and expenses connected with their wedding, upcoming wedding, that sometimes for them might be a hard number to try and budget for. This is the perfect opportunity for parents, whether they're providing the gift, cash, loan or not, that they can help their kids in a really practical way of saying, you know what, we'll cover this for you at the end of the day. So it could be just a different, interesting kind of wedding gift for those that are in that kind of situation.
And so as part of the package that we're doing and our promotion with Begxit, we are actually offering a bit of a discount, so $100 off the cost of the modern marriage contract if you use the promo code Begxit. And this is for the first 50 couples who sign up for the agreement. So we're pretty excited to be partnering with Begxit and to be able to offer this type of incentive and really to help couples who are purchasing their first home really take this first step and really to protect the assets.
Hello. That was wonderful. Thank you both for that information. It's so important. And I love the way of thinking about it as that relationship insurance. It's just, you get that for your home, for your car. It's just something you should be doing and thinking about. So I'm going to get into the Q&A. We've got some questions in the chat. I just saw our latest question, how can I have the recording? Just by signing up, registering for the event, you're automatically on the list to receive the recording. So you should get that by tomorrow around, let's say noon by tomorrow. Okay, so I'll dive into a couple questions. Some of them are a little bit specific. So Anna Marie, I'll let you take them on. And if they require a custom conversation, I'll let you speak to that a little bit more. So let's start with our first question here. A parent lends $300,000 to their daughter on a first mortgage at 5% payable monthly. No payments are made for 7 years. The property ends up being sold. Is the parent entitled to that $300,000 or $300,000 plus the 5% deferred interest? Or because no payments were made, would it be just considered a gift?
And so the reality is how the court system would sort of look at this and how a judge would look at it is, well, it appears to be something that looks like a mortgage or looks like a quote unquote loan. The reality is without any payments being made and without any quote unquote enforcement of the mortgage, more likely than not, this is going to be considered a gift. And so we actually see this scenario a lot. A little less with a mortgage, but more when it comes to whether a parent is lending money. And the reality is what the judge in the court wants to see is that this loan or mortgage needs to look as much as possible like a loan or a mortgage from a mainstream bank. And so what we need to see is payments being made, interest rates. We also need to see that if payments aren't being made, that there are adjustments made, and that the parents are going to take some quote unquote enforcement efforts to get paid. And if that doesn't happen, this is going to be treated as a gift.
Okay, great answer. Okay, and a follow-up question. Let's say a parent provides land valued at $1 million. Child and child's spouse build a house for $1.2 million on the land. Title to the land is never transferred to the child. No payments are made for the land. On marriage or breakup, who might own that newly constructed home?
Okay, George, this has a little bit extra tentacles that I think might be helpful to discuss offline. So what I'm going to suggest is, Taylor, if you put my email address directly in the chat,
Sure.
George, send me a quick email. Let's jump on a call and I can walk through some of the scenarios here with you, because I need to know a little bit more in terms of the relationship, etc. But let's have this conversation offline.
Perfect. Okay, I will put your email in the chat right away here. Okay.
Some very, very specific questions.
Great questions. So, parent invites daughter and unmarried partner to live in house without their purchasing of it. Daughter pays all the expenses. Parents buy and live in a second property. Are there tax implications for the parents?
Potentially, yes. So this one is a bit of a twist on this, and this one would need to, we would need to reach out to our colleagues in tax law, et cetera, and in even in some estate planning, because there are some other implications we would want to talk about. The longest short answer is yes, there are. Again, Chandra, if you want to send me a quick email, I can line you up with the our colleague in the our tax colleague who helps us answer all of these tricky questions, so we can make sure that you get a proper answer and you know exactly what to expect.
Awesome. Okay, great. We've got a next question here. How often should you revisit your marriage contract?
Eva, do you want to jump in on this?
Sure. I think you can be revisiting it whenever there's, like any other plans that we have, whenever there's a major change or event happening in the family. So obviously, if you're looking at separating, if there's a new baby coming into effect, if you've perhaps gotten a large inheritance. So any of those typical life events, in the same way where we might be reviewing our wills, these things may trigger for us to review the marriage contract, or in some cases we're lucky enough that we put it in a drawer and we never have to look at it again.
Fair.
The only thing I want to add to that is I know a lot of people get a little bit nervous and say, oh, I don't want to call the lawyers, they're going to make it complicated, they're going to add this and it's going to be far more expensive than what I need it to be. The reality is in our process, where we're working collaboratively, a quick call to us or an email to any one of us, and we can really sort of do a quick amendment for you. It doesn't have to mean starting the process all over from the beginning. But we see so many situations where they're not updated when they could have been updated with a simple schedule amendment, and you could save yourself so many headaches that it's worth the call. The other thing I should remind people about, because I have a current case right now with a situation where the couple breaks up and then they end up getting back together. And no one has done anything about the agreement the first go around. And now we're left in a bit of a place trying to figure out, well, does it apply or doesn't it apply? Because we were together and then we weren't and now we are. Please, 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 if you do break up and reconcile, again, a quick call to us. We can do a quick amendment and we can get you squared away.
Okay, great advice. This might depend on province, but we'll take a stab at it. So how long is it, or how long does it take to become common law in a relationship when somebody moves in?
Hi, Lena. I hope you're doing well. It's 3 years unless you have a child together.
Okay, wonderful. So this question here I've got is something that was pre-submitted. So we'll get to it in case they're here or they're watching the recording after the fact. It might be a little bit specific, but we plan to lend our son $140,000 towards the down payment on a first home purchase. He plans to buy a house with his best friend, split 50-50. The friend has a common law wife. The wife wants her name on the ownership too, so the couple would split it 25 each. The house will have 2 separate units. We would like advice on how the agreement should be written up. It should protect all parties.
Okay, so again, this is one that needs a little bit of a conversation offline because there are so many tentacles to it. But the long and short of it is this wouldn't be one agreement. The common law couple would want to have their own agreement. And then there would also be an agreement with the parents and the son with respect to that $140,000 payment, what that looks like, how it's characterized. So it's a bit of a moving pieces of putting this puzzle together, but it's not one agreement. There are a couple of different things we have to do to sort this situation out.
Okay, great. Next question. If we agree on a marriage contract, do we need 2 lawyers or can we use one lawyer to do our marriage and cohabitation contract?
You definitely need 2 independent lawyers. The reason being is each lawyer, number one, needs to be separate so you understand exactly what you're signing. So you also have the support of that lawyer who's going to be there, who's going to help answer any questions. And the Law Society also doesn't allow us to do this.
Okay, great. Okay. My daughter has owned her home and her fiance moved in 3 years ago. She had one of these contracts signed by him. Now they want to purchase another home that we will have to help finance. How do we protect our investment?
So you would do one of the modern marriage contracts. In this particular case, if we had drafted the original agreement, and you might be able to go back to the original people who did the agreement and they can do an amendment for you, or we would simply do a modern marriage contract and put it all together as per our program. So it's really a quick amendment, I think, could get this done for you.
Great. Okay. I'm going to post a question that we had chatted about yesterday, Anna Marie. Are there cheating clauses? Can you put in your contract that if he cheats, he gets nothing? Is that allowed?
You would be surprised how many times people ask me this question and how many times they want this included in their agreement. So from a legal perspective, the answer is no. There is no such thing as a cheating clause. You can put it in, but it is absolutely meaningless. They're called morality clauses. We don't do them. You may hear about them with movie stars or whatnot, putting these provisions in agreements, but they're simply not enforceable in law. From a human perspective, this is a bit of a red flag for us. So we always think, this might be a good time for you to consider maybe counseling if you think there's a real issue with fidelity in your relationship or whatnot. And we oftentimes will say, this might be a good idea to have some pre-relationship counseling, et cetera, if cheating really is a big problem in these people's relationships.
Great. Yeah, that's fair. Another one here. And you sort of touched on it during the presentation, but if you have your modern marriage contract, is debt something that can be outlined in the event of a breakup or divorce? Can you outline specifically what's my debt is mine or what's yours is yours?
Well, in general, in law already, whoever's name the debt is in is responsible for the debt. The problem we have is where one person has significant debt, it really starts to skew their net worth, because if we look at the assets minus the debt, it leaves us in a scenario where sometimes they're even in the negative. And when we have one person who's a saver and has accumulated a significant amount of wealth, and then we have the other side who's has significant debt, all of a sudden the idea of equalization becomes a little bit murky because one person's net worth is so out of skew with the others. It often leads to a very unfair result when one person has so much debt. We actually had a scenario not too long ago where one person came into the relationship with a significant amount of student debt. She was also the person who was the sole name on title to the family home. When we went to equalize, when you take the amount of student debt from the amount of equity in the home, she actually came to a negative number. And so the person on the other side was hoping to get a buyout of the family home, et cetera. The numbers actually came out to 0. So she not only keeps the home, she also has all of this debt, which basically offset everything on the value of that home. And so I just raised this as a cautionary tale that if either side has significant amount of debt, including student debt, it's a good idea to do one of these agreements so you understand the expectations and what happens should the relationship break up.
Okay, great, really good information. Another question here. I know we've come across this in some of our webinars we've done in the past on wills, where people might have this misconception that it's something they can just do themselves, and perhaps it is, but why would I want to go to a lawyer and have this drafted instead of maybe just doing it myself, getting us both to sign on it?
It's an interesting thing that we see more and more of. And that I think is in part due to the fact that if you go online, you can see almost anywhere online DIY platform packages for $99. I can get a prenup. I'm going to get the other side to sign it. We're wonderful. I don't need any of this package. I don't need lawyers. I don't need any of the complications. I'm going to, DIY. I'm going to LegalZoom it. And here's the problem. Well, first of all, we had one situation where the client and her partner did the DIY. The client was actually looking to protect a significant amount of his investment account. The agreement they signed actually didn't reflect that he was going to protect his investment account. In fact, it said the opposite, that she was going to take his investment account. And so he was shocked on breakup to learn, wait a minute, this isn't at all what we agreed to. And of course, when she realizes that, whoa, this isn't what the agreement says, all of a sudden she says, no, this is exactly what we agreed to. And so now we're in a system where we're trying to fight and figure out in the court system and try to get a judge to figure out, wait, was this the agreement? Is this what the parties intended? What does it look like? So now we're spending all sorts of expense trying to sort out an agreement that they didn't understand they were signing. And so, sorry, go ahead, Eva.
Sorry, I was just going to add to that when we're reading about the cost or time involved, and we always think lawyers make things more complicated than they need to be. That's why we've put together our team at Love and Money, that we've got 2 lawyers working together, myself, and pulling together the financial information. And we've created a flat fee or a series of flat fee packages to allow people to say, this is what you're actually getting, this is what it's going to cost. So it makes it much clearer and simpler for somebody to say, is it worth the investment of that? Where typically if we would see other services that are billed on an hourly basis, and then they start getting more complicated and people don't know how much they would be budgeting for doing this, and there's a resistance there. So we purposely created this as flat fee packages exactly to answer these kinds of questions.
And the only other thing I would add is if you go online or use LegalZoom or any of these sort of DIYs, be very careful, because a lot of them are American-based companies, and they're going to try to sell you American agreements, which are going to be of no effect. So I just throw that as a cautionary tale.
Yeah, so this is just less headache, less stress, more efficient, and just much more full scope. Okay.
I would say no surprises.
Yeah,
Certainty.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm just going to make a note. I'm watching the time here as well. So if anyone has questions, you're in our attendees right now, you're part of the attendees, feel free to submit them. I've got a couple more here, but I just want to be mindful. We'll stay on for a couple more minutes. So if the contract was signed 3 years ago and the house is worth twice the amount from that time, in the event of a divorce, what would that second party be entitled to? His name is not on the mortgage or the title of the home.
Well, it depends what the parties agreed to back when that contract was signed. We oftentimes see couples who just want to protect the initial down payment, and then they're happy to share the equity. We have other clients who prefer to take a share of the equity based on their own down payment. So if one person contributed 75 versus 25, then that's how they split the equity. So the reality is that, or the question really is what was the agreement 3 years ago? And if, as the relationship is growing and as you're sort of moving forward, if you think it's a good time to have a conversation on changing what that initial agreement is, that's okay too. You can have these conversations and you can do a new agreement, and you can, if you think what was originally agreed to doesn't make sense anymore, you absolutely can do a new agreement.
Okay, great. I wanted to just touch briefly on if there's any areas of a modern marriage contract that are, or if there's any areas that would be best to leave out of the modern marriage contract, and if there's things that it maybe just doesn't cover that you might need alternative arrangements for.
Do you want to jump in, Eva?
I'm not sure that, again, it depends on the client and the situation. So we can keep it as simple as saying all we want to include is monies that have been put towards a house. In other cases, people want to protect not only monies that, whether it was the bank of mom and dad, their own monies that they put towards a down payment, and the assets and liabilities that they have at the starting point. And say, if we break up, you're keeping your assets, your debts, and so forth. It can get into something that's more complex, but for what we're trying to do, certainly with regards to a house purchase, we're really suggesting that we limit it to that at this point in time.
Great. Okay. Really good information. To me, this really seems like a no-brainer. And why aren't more people doing this? Do you think it's that hesitation, that sort of misconceptions that you talked through?
I think so. I think certainly people just aren't aware. I think it covers off a lot of the myths that Anna Marie covered off. Oh, they saw friends or family doing something and they have some idea of how things work. And they're usually the opposite of what really is supposed to be happening. I think there's certainly some concerns in terms of rocking the relationship, so that therefore approaching it in a more modern way. And that was part of the reasoning for calling it modern, because we believe people today are more pragmatic and more realistic perhaps than they were a couple of generations or so ago. And I think cost certainly has something to do with it too. Yes, they would like to do it, but they believe it's going to cost a whole lot. And again, that's why we've created flat fee packages, so they have some idea of exactly what it's going to cost them, and we think very reasonably priced.
Exactly. Great. I'm going to flip back to that slide just so everyone can see that as well. I believe it's here, but what I've done is I've put the website to go to loveandmoney.ca in the chat if you want to just explore a bit more of what Anna Marie and Eva are offering. I've also put the Calendly link where you can just really quickly book a 15-minute discovery call if you have like more specific questions, you want to know more about your specific scenario. Book a meeting. They are fabulous to work with and really, really communicative. Anna Marie answers like that. It's awesome. So I've closed down the chat. If anyone has any last minute burning questions, feel free to pop them in. We can answer them after the event or book that 15-minute chat with Anna Marie or Eva to chat more on your situation. So I'm going to close us off just super, super brief. Vexit Life is where you can go as well if you want more resources, more information on work, life, finances, relationships. And then if you want to match with a professional, you can use Vexit.com. So Anna Marie and Eva are out of Toronto and are happy to help anyone in that region. Even if you're in Calgary or Winnipeg or across Canada, you can use Vexit to match with someone if you prefer more locally as well. It's completely free to use the platform, and we try to find you your perfect match. So you answer a series of questions and just go through that process. So thank you so much, Anna Marie and Eva, for taking the time today to educate us all on this. Like I said, it's so important. It seems like such a no-brainer, but this information is critical to helping people take that next step. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Welcome. And thank you everyone in attendance. It's great to see people coming out to these events. Like I said, it's going to be recorded. We're going to send you more information, so look out for that. We'll be reaching out. Don't try to do it alone. There are professionals who do this every day, who are in it, who see what happens in the event that you're on the other side of it. So it's way better to be prepared and take that step and work with a professional. So thanks for joining us. I hope you guys all have a great day and join us again soon.